Students, families, counselors, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it is you are joining for today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining StriveScan and Cachet's virtual college exploration program. A few housekeeping items before we begin with today's panel. First and foremost, you're encouraged to ask questions of your panelists throughout the session via the Q&A button that you see in the bottom of your screen. When you submit a question, it gets sent to our 5 panelists, and they will work to answer the question during the session, at the conclusion of the session, but they probably will not get to every question during this 45 minutes. They will receive a copy of all those questions and will potentially be able to reach out with you afterward if you do have specific questions. If you have a specific question for a specific institution, make sure to indicate that in your question. So rather than saying, how is your psychology program, say, hey, WashU, how is your psychology program? As a reminder, your camera and your microphone are turned off so the panelists cannot see or hear you. So if you do have questions, make sure to type them in through that Q&A button. This is one of 40 presentations that we are doing that are STEM focused. So we encourage you to check out strivescan.com/virtual/STEM for the rest of the programs that run through Thursday evening. We're also presenting with the colleges that change lives starting on Saturday morning, strivescan.com/virtual/CTCL. When you signed up today, you received a barcode for this event. You do not need that barcode for this virtual program. And I am recording this session and all of the sessions, and they will be made available shortly after at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists.
Welcome, everyone. And just like Zach said, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm joined by 4 of my outstanding colleagues from a variety of institutions around the country. Our goal today is to present to you for probably, hopefully, about 25 minutes. We want to make sure we have time for questions at the end. And we're going to introduce ourselves as we begin our own slide section. So let me just quickly tell you who I am. I'm Mary Tipton-Woolley, Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission at the Georgia Institute of Technology, better known as Georgia Tech, in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been in college admission for over 20 years at both Tech, a fairly large public institution, and also a small private liberal arts college. So I'm glad to talk to you today about communicating STEM interest in your college application. And I want to first just acknowledge that this is not remotely a normal year in any way, and say that we all are living that in our own lives daily, and we all understand the impacts that so many different things that are happening in our country, including COVID-19, but many other things, are impacting students and families, health and economics, well-being, academics in your schools, your activities, and you're going to hear that reflected throughout this presentation. Next slide, Pete. Let me first just say that it's really also important for us to acknowledge that we represent 5 selective institutions, but there are STEM degrees available at many of the over 4,000 institutions in the United States, many of which you're going to find have much less pressure at admission processes. So don't walk away thinking that we're the only kind of school out there. There are many, many. But if you're applying to a more selective school and you're thinking about how you put an application together to reflect your experience with STEM, I know that we're going to be able to share some tips and advice for you today. Next slide. One of the most important things that I'm going to take a wild guess you may have heard before, or if you haven't, I hope you'll think a lot about it, which is fit. What kind of institution is going to be the right fit for you? And then as institutions, what kind of students are going to be the right fit for us? And just to set that up a little bit, you can see here I've included our institution missions, which is really a great value statement on what we're looking for and what we hope to instill in the students as they spend time with us over the next 4 years. Next slide. So as you think about the way you're translating your experiences into fit, this is something that you want to consider. How can you explain how the things that you've done in high school fit into the mission of different institutions? How can you translate that into showing us that you're going to be a great fit for our institutions? And with that, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk in depth about putting together the activity section of your application and the essay portion of the application, 2 parts that are really quite subjective, and it makes a difference how you fill those out. So I'm going to turn that over to some of my other panelists and look forward to answering questions in a few minutes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sneha Kohirkar. I'm an Associate Director of Admission at Rice University, which is in Houston, Texas. And I'm a Rice alum myself, and I've been working in the admission office for just about 5 years. So I'm happy to kind of start talking a little bit about, as you're looking at your entire application to universities, one of the important things that colleges are going to be looking at is your academic preparation. And really that kind of boils down to coursework. So it is important for students to really demonstrate their ability to handle college level coursework. And if you're interested in STEM, colleges, we're going to want to make sure that you're going to be able to handle that STEM coursework specifically. So there are a few different things that we're going to be looking for. And keep in mind that every institution is different, as Mary Tipton mentioned. So there are going to be slight nuances that you might want to check on with each institution that you're interested in researching or applying to. So we'll start out with college prep coursework in math and science. So these are kind of your foundational STEM areas. And institutions are going to want to make sure that you have that foundation well set so that as you jump into college coursework, you're going to be able to be successful. You're going to be able to master the more advanced topics and graduate with that degree. And there are different ways that an institution will do that. Some institutions have specific course requirements that they require you to have taken in high school in order to be eligible to pursue a degree. So for example, some institutions, including I believe Columbia and maybe others here, require you take calculus and physics in order to pursue an engineering major. On the other hand, there are other institutions that will just offer you recommendations and ask you more generally to take certain types of courses, so kind of broad recommendations. For example, Rice will say you should be taking the more rigorous course options available to you. So not dictating specific classes, but broadly giving you an idea of what we're looking for. And so it's important to look at what, again, the colleges you're looking at are asking you for and showing that preparation in your courses. Now, another type of course we're going to be looking at would be elective courses in STEM areas. So these might be your computer science and any engineering tracks. We know some schools offer medical or medicine related classes as well, or tracks. And it's important to note that elective courses are not required by colleges and institutions, just like they're not required in your high school in order to graduate. These are an opportunity for you to further explore your STEM interests. So say you don't know much about engineering, but it sounds really interesting to you and your school offers a class in engineering. It could be a great way for you to really expose yourself to the field and better understand what you might want to pursue in college. And it does show institutions that you are following through on your interest and show us that you are engaging with these subjects areas that you are intending to continue pursuing at a higher level. But again, that being said, many high schools don't offer these types of courses, or they offer them in very different ways. And the type of content covered in these classes is going to really vary across high schools as well. So these are not required. We do want students to focus on the foundational coursework and see these as kind of supplemental. Next slide. All right, so another important thing to note is that even if you are interested in pursuing STEM in college and you are 100% set on that, colleges are going to look at your coursework beyond STEM as well. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, in order to be successful in a STEM field, you do need other skills beyond math and science. So if you want to be an engineer solving problems, what types of questions are you asking? Who are you solving these problems for? What are going to be the real world implications of the design solutions that you're coming up with? Those are all topics that are not specifically rooted in math and science, but are really rooted more in maybe the social sciences, the humanities. So colleges are going to want to know that you have developed the critical thinking skills and the communication skills to really be successful in a STEM field, whether you're trying to be a professional like an engineer, a doctor, or going into research as well. You will need skills like reading, writing, and again, critical thinking in areas beyond STEM. So this also, taking classes beyond STEM is also going to demonstrate your ability to be successful in a range of subject areas. So all students, attending college are going to likely have to take classes beyond math and science as well, even if that's what you're majoring in. So it shows an admission officer that you're going to be able to handle that coursework, those general requirements, even if they may not be your main strength or your main interest. We also know that many students change their mind once they get to college, and so showing that you have academic skills in areas beyond STEM can also show that if you choose to change your major or pursue multiple academic interests, depending on what's available at your institution, you're going to be able to do that successfully. And lastly, Mary Tipton mentioned this, but rigor is considered within the context of your school. So when colleges are looking at the types of classes that you have taken during high school, we will review you based on what was available to you. So each application comes with a school profile, typically, which gives us an idea of what courses your school offers, and that really helps us understand that context. We also know that course availability might have really changed based on COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on your school. So if there are any changes or certain restrictions that are now placed on you that limit the types of classes you're able to take, feel free to let us know. Include that in your application, and typically maybe your counselor or your school profile will include that information as well, but it doesn't hurt to let us know on your own also. Broadly, take advantage of what is available to you. We want to make sure that you are really looking at what academic offerings you have and follow those interests that you have, but make sure that you are, challenging yourself as well as showing that you're going to be able to handle that college coursework, regardless of what institution you go to. And then again, keep in mind each institution will have different nuances in their course requirements. All right, so that completes my section, so I will pass it off. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronica Aguilar-Hornig. I am an Associate Director at Columbia University, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to demonstrate your interest in STEM on the Common App Activity section or the Coalition Activity section, whichever application you're using. I know we're getting a lot of questions about how do I demonstrate my interest in STEM, so hopefully I can answer some of that right now. When you look at the activities section of the application, it's easy to think, oh, extracurricular activities, that only means clubs or teams at school. And it certainly does, but actually it encompasses anything that you are doing with your time outside of the classroom. If you want us to know how you spend your time and how you're pursuing your interest in STEM or anything else, please put it on that section of the application, because otherwise we might not know about it, right? So that includes doing research, whether at school or outside of school, jobs you're working, volunteer positions, internships. Maybe you're taking courses outside of school. Maybe you have family responsibilities, especially now with COVID-19 and being at home. I know a lot of students have responsibilities watching younger siblings while their parents work. Anything like that, tell us about it. Tell us if you're tinkering or creating on your own, if you're involved in your religious community, or anything that is not listed on here, right? We genuinely want to know how you pursue your interests, how you spend your time, and that's really what that activity section is for. Next slide, please. So how do you highlight these activities? What should you put on there? I have a sample set of a few activities to look at in a moment, but big things to remember, tell us the name of the activities and try not to use too many acronyms. We are familiar with a lot of things, but not everything, right? So spell it out for us, please. Tell us your role. If you have a title in the organization or something, please list it. Tell us the amount of time per week and how long you've participated. We know that that can fluctuate, right? But try and give us an estimate. Tell us what you do in the activity and any achievements or notable highlights that you might have. Next slide. So here's an example of how you can really display that in the activity section. So for instance, here we can see you had work and it was paid. In 11th grade, you did it over your summer break for 40 hours a week for 9 weeks a year. You intend to continue it. That's what that top part there on the left-hand side says. And then it says summer research internship at University of the United States. Gives us a quick little summary of what you've been doing. And you can see how this could work for something outside of school, inside of school, or anything in between. Next slide, please. How else can can I showcase my activities, right? You can do this in other parts of the application depending on if a school accepts supplemental materials. Some schools do, some schools don't. That is really, as you're looking at schools and doing research, it's hard to keep track of everything. I do recommend having some kind of an Excel sheet or somewhere so you can know the nuances of what every school accepts, but be aware that some schools will accept a maker portfolio, for instance, if you have can demonstrate things that you've been building. If you've been doing research and you have an abstract, some schools would really love to see that, and whether admissions reviews it or faculty will review it. So learn if schools want to have that. Some schools might want a video supplement of work that you've been doing or research you've had. That can be a great way to showcase what you've been interested in. And some schools will accept an extra letter of recommendation. With extra letters of recommendation, of course, I would always say be judicious. You don't want to submit 10 extra letters of recommendation. You want to maybe think about one person who knows you in a very different light from your teachers and your counselors, right? Who can talk about you in a different way. So a research supervisor, an employer, a volunteer supervisor. If you don't have an extra letter of recommendation, that is fine. It is truly extra. You have it, cool. If not, don't worry about it. The next slide. So one thing to consider, can you explain the impacts of this past year in your application? And we understand that for many students, because of COVID-19, there was an interruption in your extracurricular activities. Maybe you didn't continue the clubs throughout the entire year. Maybe there were summer programs you wanted to do and you couldn't do it, or it was moved online. That is fine. We completely understand. Tell us about it. Tell us about the interruptions. There are questions on the Common App and the Coalition application asking, how were you impacted by COVID-19? So explain that in there, or anything else. Tell us what the interruption was. What had you planned to do? What were you going to do this summer or this fall? Has what you have been doing been different from your original plans? Have you been exploring STEM, or maybe you haven't because you are focused on other parts of your life right now, and that is also fine. Tell us about it. Just give us that context, right? Because if we don't have the context, we don't have the information, we can't use that in the application process. So the more information you give us, the better. And know that we are human beings. I think sometimes that is easy to forget. We generally want to know you as a person and why you're applying to our school, and the other information we need to review your application. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague now.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Petersell. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Trinity is a small liberal arts college, but we do have a strong representation. About a quarter of the students who go to Trinity graduate with a STEM degree, and we do have an ABET accredited engineering program, hence the connection to STEM. Prior to working at Trinity, I did work for 4 years at an entirely engineering school, so I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about how to convey or highlight STEM interests in your essays. And as we've been presenting, I've been seeing a lot of questions coming into the chat about, I am really interested in STEM, but I didn't take a ton of advanced STEM coursework, or not a lot of my extracurricular activities have to do with STEM. Is that going to hurt me? The answer to that is no, it won't necessarily hurt you, and this is why. Veronica just mentioned, we are human beings on the admission side. We also want to remind you that you are a human being, right? You are a human being with a voice and with a story. You are so much more than the courses that are on your transcript. You are so much more than all of the extracurricular activities on your resume. So your essay is really the opportunity to bring your voice forth and tell us that story in your application. So from my perspective, your essay is really an opportunity for you to provide context for how your interests and goals in STEM developed. So maybe you didn't have a traditional pathway to learning about engineering, or maybe you've been playing with Legos since you were 2 years old and you've always known that you wanted to be an engineer. All of those stories are valid. There's no right way to get into a STEM field, but what we want to know is, who are you and how did you get here, and what are you interested in? So really your essay is an opportunity to help the admissions counselors who are reading your application get to know you, hear your story and your voice, and here are some questions that I usually think of, questions that I hold in my mind as I'm reading a student's essay. What makes this student tick? What excites or motivates this student? What does this student value? And what is the impact that they want to make? So even if whether they've had tons of experience in STEM activities and STEM related coursework, or they're just discovering STEM in this moment, these are the questions that I really want to think about, because it can indicate to me what is this student's ability to really dig deep, dive into the coursework at my institution, and ultimately make an impact in whatever STEM field they choose to pursue going forward. So that's sort of the general overview of essays. I do want to talk for a moment about institution-specific essays, because I think these are really important. So this is also known as the why this university, why this college, why this program, right? So these essays are often supplemental essays. They might appear on a Common App supplement. Occasionally they are required, but in many cases they might actually be an optional supplemental essay. Whether this essay is optional or not, I would encourage you to do it, and here's why. It's not because I'm a mean person who wants you to do more writing in your senior year of high school. It's because that institution-specific essay is a question that has been developed by that college or university, or by that program that that you're applying to. So by putting that question out into the world, the institution is indicating something about their values to you, and they want you to respond, and they're giving you an opportunity to really explore who they are as an institution, and to provide an institution-specific voice in your application. So it's really an opportunity to strongly convey your fit or your specific interest in a program or institution. In order to prepare to write that essay, I would say, going back to what Mary Tipton said at the beginning, research the mission of each college or university, get to know the specific programs that are offered by each college, because certainly we all offer different forms of engineering, but we might have different concentrations and specializations within those engineering programs. Get to know the culture of the institution, so that some ways you could do that might be following us on social media, connecting with students on our campuses. Definitely read the prompt and respond to the prompt directly. And know that if you start down the avenue of researching a specific program and you find that you're struggling to write this essay, and it doesn't seem like this program actually is a good fit for you, it might not be, and that's okay. We have no expectation that every STEM student is a fit for every STEM program out there, and that's why it's important to actually spend some time getting to know the different institutions that you're applying to. I wanted to do one last slide with some common pitfalls to avoid in essays. These are common sort of missed opportunities that I've seen when I've read essays from engineering students or from STEM students more broadly. So first of all, of course, not understanding the institution's mission or programs. So writing a very general essay that seems like it could have been submitted to any institution. Again, not responding to the prompt. I know that when you're writing lots of different college applications, it is very tempting to recycle material, and certainly it is okay to recycle material from essay to essay, but you still want to make sure that you're responding to that institution's question and that the response you're giving makes sense, because if it doesn't, it could indicate to us, oh, maybe this student isn't actually super interested in our institution, or maybe they're not the right fit for us. Other common pitfalls I've seen, when a student provides too much technical explanation of a STEM-related project or activity instead of writing about what it means to them. So again, this is about you. This is about your story and your voice. Any student who has built a computer could probably write me a pretty solid technical explanation of how to build a computer, but that doesn't tell me anything about that student. So if you built that computer, tell me what it meant to you. How did you get involved? What did you learn from that experience? What would you do differently going forward? Make it about you. In the similar vein, common pitfall is writing an academic or research paper on a topic you're interested in instead of a personal essay. So again, if you're a student who's really interested in environmental science and you want to save the planet and fight climate change, that's great, but tell me what it means to you. Don't write your whole paper with facts about climate change. Anyone could write that paper. Only you can write your story. And then another pitfall to avoid, attempting to describe or share all of your STEM-related activities in one essay, so basically a rehash of your resume. I see a lot of students do that, where they think that in order to tell their story, they have to tell every single STEM-related thing they've ever done, We've seen your activities and accomplishments. We've seen your transcript. So I think it works better to scope that essay smaller, pick one meaningful activity or one meaningful experience, maybe one or two experiences that are related, and really dig deep and tell a compelling story about those one or two things that are really meaningful to you, that you feel show who you are. And last pitfall, not taking advantage of that additional information section. So as Veronica just covered before I started speaking, we know that things are really tricky right now with COVID-19. This has had a lot of major impacts on the way that students are wrapping up their high school experience. And so rather than trying to put all of that context into your essay, save that essay space for the personal stories and put all of that additional contextual information into the additional information section where it belongs. So really utilize that space to provide extra details about impacts to your schooling experience, impacts of COVID-19 on your extracurricular activities, and then tell the more personal story in your essays. So that's me wrapped up. I'm gonna pass it over to Easton and he's gonna take us home.
Awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Easton Knott, Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admission at Washington University in St. Louis, also a very proud WashU alum. So I am here to kind of look a little bit further into the future, understanding that you all may change your mind at some point, and that's okay. And so there are a number of ways to move towards a STEM education that may not begin with starting off as an engineer or a biology major or something related to that from day one. You have a lot of different paths once you get to the college level to find your fit, and it's okay. It can start from your first week on campus. It can start after you've already graduated with an undergraduate degree. You can still get towards that career that you may find as your true path. So the first thing I want to talk about are just universities, larger universities that may have a STEM program within them. So many programs out there, colleges that offer students the ability to take classes or major in engineering without actually being a part of a formal engineering program. So let's say you are coming in, you are an English major, and you're able to take classes also in the engineering school that the university has. Maybe you're able to add on a second major in computer science or something to that end. There additionally could be programs out there that are a little bit more selective, that offer you the ability to switch your main focus from, again, let's say at WashU, we have our College of Arts and Sciences, but we also have our McKelvey School of Engineering. So if you want to start off and say, okay, I'm a student in the College of Arts and Sciences, but you figure out within your first year or so that engineering is really where your passions lie, that's okay. You have the ability to transfer in, or excuse me, to apply for a transfer into that school to focus most of your classwork on engineering. So you need to establish that academic record of STEM related courses during your first year. That way you're able to transition smoothly there. Additionally, for students that are interested in going to medical school, want to be on any of those pre-health related tracks, many programs across the country, most programs across the country are tracks. These are not majors. So when you see, or you're asking about something like pre-med, these are courses that you're taking in addition to whatever your major may be. So different schools have different policies on what this may look like, but it gives you the ability to come in, take coursework in areas that are passionate to you. So if you, again, want to be a political science major, but you also know you want to go to medical school, it gives you the ability to be taking courses alongside of that intended major while still preparing yourself for your graduate studies. Additionally, you may go to a university where you show up and you realize, you know what, I really love this idea of studying biomedical engineering, but it's not offered here. What can I do? You have, of course, the ability to transfer schools. Whatever your first choice is, it's not necessarily the choice of where you're going to graduate from, and that's okay. If you look at a number of universities in their transfer policies, they will actually list out exactly the courses that they're looking for in strong applicants, whether they're applying in their first or second year, in order to, again, boost your chances of being admitted to that school. WashU, again, we're the same way. So if you're looking to apply as a student in the engineering program, you can look and see, okay, I need to make sure that I've taken through Calc 2, that I've taken general chemistry and organic chemistry by the end of my first year of college if I want to be able to transfer in as a sophomore. So you have those abilities out there to start setting up your course listing to then, again, seamlessly transition into that other program at a different university. Next slide, Pete. Additionally, there's a lot of programs out there that are more formal in their partnerships with other schools. So these are going to be opportunities for students to be supplementing their coursework that they're taking at their kind of home university with more STEM focused programs that are offered through partner schools. So I have worked at another university where it didn't necessarily have anything related directly to STEM, it had a college of science, but nothing in the more technical engineering fields. So students were able to, let's say, take a major in chemistry while also supplementing that with courses from a different school in the area in engineering, and able to graduate with a chemical engineering degree through this partnership through the two schools. You also have the community college route of many community colleges, especially in larger cities, may have partnerships with larger universities in the area, allows you to be on a direct path, take your community college coursework, get your associate's degree and move right in with a direct entry program, usually with a scholarship attached to it, into a larger STEM major at a larger university. So wonderful opportunity again to kind of widen your scope at the beginning and then focus in as you move towards junior and senior year. 3+2 and 4+2 programs are more and more common. We are seeing them across the country. These are, again, larger partnerships with schools that don't have a formal engineering program that offer students the ability to get a liberal arts degree, whether that's in 3 years or 4 years, and then transition into a program that is more engineering focused for 2 years, giving them the ability to get both a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science in that either 5 or 6 year span, depending on the program and the way that you want to go through it. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility in, again, having multiple areas of focus during your time in academics. Additionally, a lot of these programs will have the option for a 3rd year of engineering to get a master's degree. So let's say you are doing a 3+2 program with that 3rd year. So you're doing basically a 3+3. So in 6 years, you can graduate with 3 degrees, which is a pretty cool opportunity. Next slide. And then, of course, you could go 2 or through 4 years of undergrad, be focused on whatever interests may have hit you, and then graduate and realize, you know what, I actually want to switch gears. There's actually something that I was dying to do years ago, but I never really took the chance at going for it, or just something that is a new interest to you, and that's okay. There are a number of graduate programs that are engineering focused that are open to students with non-engineering backgrounds that are looking for a different career path. There are also a number of options, things like bridge programs, or you may hear post-bac or post-baccalaureate programs. These are designed for students that have not taken STEM courses that are trying to fill in the gaps when they're getting ready to apply to STEM graduate programs. So that could be something related to engineering. That could be students that are looking to go to med school. A friend of mine was she graduated with a degree in history, wanted to then go to medical school after graduating from college and had 0 coursework required, was able to do a post-bac option for a 1.5 years and then move on to med school. So wonderful opportunity there to make that happen for you. Additionally, there are a lot of schools out there that have more abbreviated programs that give you that little bit of a taste of what may happen. So for example, again, WashU, we have something called J-Term. It's an 11-day intensive program, and it offers you the ability to take a 3-credit class on campus, but also get to know WashU and the surrounding area before you were to apply as a transfer student. That way you know, hey, is this really what I want to do and what I really want to get my degree in before fully going through that application and that transfer process. So just because you may decide on applying someplace for whatever reason as a high school senior, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're going to end up at the end of the day. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's where your education will end. So there's a number of different paths that you can take to fulfilling that STEM passion that you may have or that you may develop over time.
All right, so we're gonna have a little time for Q&A right now, but there are a lot of questions coming in. We're answering what we can. I'm very sorry if we can't get to your question. If you have questions specific for each institution, we have the email address for our offices up here. So that is the best way to reach us. Always look through our website. Our FAQs are super detailed, but I've been noticing a few trends coming in through the Q&A that I'm gonna put forth to my colleagues here. One thing that keeps coming up is sort of, what's better, this or that? Should I have this many extracurriculars? How are you going to like factor in my extracurriculars versus my essay versus my curriculum, which I think generally is a question of like, what is holistic review? So I can just generally say for all of us that use holistic review, there's no formula that we're plugging your application into in order to decide if we think that you are a great fit for our institution. But I'm also going to turn over to my colleagues to maybe talk a little more about, like, do we want to see X number of STEM activities on the extracurricular list, or do we want your essay to be about a certain topic? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll just add one piece to what you said, which is really great. I think that is sort of the underlying piece of that question. But, you know, we talked at the beginning about fit and mission. Don't let that sound like we want all of our students to be exactly the same. We'd be really boring places if that were the case. Not to mention that, hey, we're talking about STEM, and there's all kinds of research that shows that when teams come together that have different perspectives to approach problem solving, there's a lot more problems, there's a lot more solutions that come to the table. So I think if you heard us all talk about the way we make decisions, you would hear us talk about maybe shaping or crafting or whatever word we use a class, which means that we're looking for diversity in so many different aspects. But we're looking for traits within that we know these kinds of students are going to be charged by the mission that our institutions are putting forth. So that's the main thing I would say is if we used a formula to make admission, we'd have boring campuses, and none of us want that. And so we're looking for all different types of students, and you want to be yourself in the application process. Show us what you have to offer. But remember that we are working to put together a class that's going to represent lots of variety of diversity.
I think something important to remember, especially as you are looking at schools that may have a higher selectivity rate, schools that are only admitting, under 20% of the applicants, is that the applicant pool is going to be much larger than the possible admits, right? There are going to be many, many more qualified students than students that could possibly be admitted. And so what our job may be at that point is it's not just about what classes you took. It's not just about the scores that you may or may not have. It really is getting into the person that you are, the community fit, what you're going to bring to the community. Maybe that is in the classroom, maybe that is in research, but it's also in your student group involvement. Are you going to be involved on our campus? Are you going to be involved in the city that you're in? Are you going to be a good roommate and classmate and teammate? All that stuff that really makes you tick, that makes you is much more, I think, impactful when we get to our, like our committee process. When you're sitting in a committee room, there's not many times where you're going to say, look at this ACT score. We have to admit this student based off of this ACT score. Because at that point, you already know what those ranges are. You know where you're at. It's, you need to read this essay because this student really impacted me by what they said, or I can see them flourishing on this campus in XYZ program. There's so many different reasons why we could admit you. And so we want to really get to know that full person. And it's about you being yourself. You're much better at being yourself than at being somebody else. So allowing us to get to know that is so wonderful.
All right, I've got another question that's coming up a bunch where folks are asking, if I want to study STEM, does my personal essay have to be about STEM, or can it be about a different topic?
So, and this is why I said it's about you and your voice. It is not about what we want, right? It's about what you want. And so I worked, like I said, at an engineering school for 4 years, and I read lots and lots and lots of essays that were not at all about STEM. They were not about building computers. They were not about Legos. They were not about robotics or engineering programs. And plenty of those students got admitted to the institution because it's really about learning about who you are as a person. Are you someone who is excited to make an impact? Are you someone who has lots of, a variety of different interests? And so I wouldn't necessarily say that your essay has to be on STEM unless, going back to my slide, the prompt is specifically asking about STEM, right? So if you're writing one of those institution-specific essays and they're asking you a question about, you know, which specific program at our institution are you interested in, then of course I would say, you know, focus in on the STEM and those topics. But in terms of that general common application personal essay, I wouldn't say that it has to be about STEM. And in fact, if anything, right, if you have lots of STEM activities and lots of STEM coursework, having an essay that's showing another side of you and adding another dimension can actually make your application feel a little bit more well-rounded. I would encourage you to think about your application as a whole piece, right? So if you've already talked about, you know, or you're showing a lot of STEM interest in other sections, that essay can be about, you know, it can be about STEM, but it can be also about your family, about another activity you're interested in, an experience that you had, as long as it's authentic to you.
Thank you. Another question that's coming up, for those schools that are test optional, whether you've been test optional for a long time or you're becoming test optional this year, do we expect to see scores, or are we actually optional with testing? I can say for Columbia, we're optional. I'll let other folks go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in. Rice is optional, test optional as of for this upcoming year as well, and we are also genuinely optional. So I don't know if others wanted to jump in, but I'll just say I think it's really important to really read those statements that schools have shared about their testing policy, and kind of pay attention to the entire, you know, explanation and not just the word test optional, because that can give you more insight.
I think something else that's important with looking at test optional schools is understanding what the average testing profile may look like at a given school. I've worked at another institution that had been test optional for a very long time and saw students that applied test optional with scores that would have been giving them the highest scholarship possible that were very, very strong. But they were also applying to maybe other highly selective schools that testing profile would have been right in the middle or below their middle 50%. And so understanding the differences between schools may offer you more insight into, okay, I'm going to apply test optional to this school, but I may apply with scores to this school because my application may look stronger. And so knowing what those averages look like from school to school will help you make your decision. But ultimately, like Sneha said, really read what the individual schools are saying to understand how important that is. Also understand if a school may be test optional in admissions, but in order to receive a merit scholarship, you need to supply or have testing. That's a big one, and understanding the differences and what you could get. So like for us, you can still get merit scholarships, even if you apply test optional, that's okay, but it's not necessarily guaranteed from school to school.
I think another thing that needs to be said, and this is maybe obvious, but a lot of schools that are moving to test optional, so Trinity's been test optional since 2015, we are truly test optional. A lot of schools that are moving in that direction now are moving that way because we know that many of you might not have test scores to share. So it may not be a matter of should I send, should I not send to these specific schools. For you right now in this moment, if you did not get the opportunity to take the SAT or ACT, you may not have a choice, which means that we do not have a choice other than to be genuinely test optional, because we still want you, right? We know it's not your fault that you didn't get to take those tests, but that doesn't mean that we don't want really good, strong students to apply to our school. So it's a lot of it is having to do with circumstance, you know, but for the most part, I would say if a school says that they're test optional, that really means that not sending those test scores should not hurt you in the process, unless, you know, like Easton said, something related to scholarships.
I think just generally, we are not trying to trip anyone up. We are trying to be as transparent as possible on our website and in our communications. So know that we really have, you know, want to communicate with you what we truly are looking for. We don't have that much time yet. I guess just general, one question that I thought was really cool. How do you write about a challenge you may have pursued, dealt with without complaining about that challenge? How do you present that in your application? Anyone?
I can jump in. You know, certainly if there has been a challenge that you want us to know about, something that's really impacted your life, certainly feel like you can use that essay space to talk about that. And what's important is to not just describe, you know, the challenge and the hardships that it may have caused, but maybe what you might have learned from that experience, what you've done from that experience. If it's something that you've overcome, you can talk about that. But sometimes there are things that are still going on, but how maybe has your mindset changed? How has that changed your direction and what you want to do, what you want to pursue? So it doesn't have to be, you know, completely in a negative space. You can transition into how that has shaped you into what you're doing or what you're planning to do. And that's what I would say kind of lifts those essays a little bit and helps us really understand how you've grown from those experiences and what you would be bringing to our campus in terms of your, you know, your talents, your abilities, but also your personality and your way of thinking and your approach and perspective.
Awesome. Any final thoughts? Any words of advice? Well, we have the last 60 seconds.
I was just going to quickly say that in reading all your questions, I sense so much worry and stress that we know is a really big part of the college process for high school students. And I just want to encourage you to be yourself in your application process. Trust the process. Know there are over 4,000 colleges in the United States out there, and one of them is going to be the right fit for you. This does work out for students. I also just want to say that we see you this year. We recognize that it's not unlike any year in our careers. And so we are right there with you. Our home environments are not like any year in our careers. And so we totally understand that.
Well, thank you so much to the panelists for sharing this information, and students and counselors, thank you so much for joining. As you close this window, a very quick 4-question survey will appear, so we do ask for your feedback. I will also give a plug that each of these institutions on today's panel are also doing their own individual information session throughout the next 2 days through Thursday evening. So we encourage you to go to strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. So rather than them splitting up amongst the 5 of them in 45 minutes, they'll get 45 minutes just of their institution. So we encourage you to sign up for that individual session as well. We are recording this session, and it is going to be available shortly after today at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM as well, the same place you went to register today. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.